Thompson will bring it up. Janssen the flip, trying to get it into the corner, went off Kavina's stick. Jeremy Roenick and Kavina collide. Roenick still with it. Gets it away to Gagne. Gagne for Roenick, lets it go. Primo draws it, side of the net. Roenick shot. It's gone! Simon Gagne! We've got a game 7!
Hey everybody, it's Isaiah, and I'm here with Chef B, who's going to tell us about one of our sponsors here. Chef?
Yeah, O&B Puckcast is now brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. The winter months can be especially hard on our homes, from roof damage and peeling siding to frozen pipes and toilet overflows. Call Summit Public Adjusters before you call your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be stressful and confusing. Let Summit Public Adjusters take the stress out of the claim process by having our guys work for you. Get the most for your money and your repairs. The next time the big snow or the rain leaves you with some home damage, contact us for a free consultation. Summit Public Adjusters are licensed in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Learn more at summitpublicadjusters.com or call 215-752-0560. Just tell them that the chef sent you.
Yeah, what was that number again, Chef?
215-752-0560.
That's terrific. All right, we're going to carry on with the rest of our show. Hey, everybody, it's Isaiah. Just reminding you about Jim's South Street, 400 South Street in Philadelphia, PA. They're back. That's right. After the fire, they've returned. And now you have, in the 40-year tradition of Philly cheesesteaks, Jim's South Street down on 400 South Street in Philly. If you're down there, check it out. The finest cheesesteaks, hoagies, and fries in the grandest Philadelphia tradition. You know you want one. And if you're down there, if you live down there, of course, you can use Grubhub or DoorDash, whatever it takes. Jim South Street, 400 South Street in Philadelphia. They're back. Get one soon. And we are back. It is Isaiah. Welcome to the O&B Puckcast, episode number 249, brought to you by FlyersNittyGritty.com and Jim South Street. So the Philadelphia Flyers are 24, 26, and 7 for 55 points. They went 1-2 since our last show. And as we record, they're on the Four Nations break, of course. There are 6 teams that are still in front of them for the Eastern Conference wild card spot. 25 games remaining. Doesn't look too good. And we're going to talk about what that means for the rest of the year for the Flyers and why they did what they did and why they perhaps might do a little bit more regarding the trade deadline after the Frost and Farabee deals. So let's bring in our panel. Chef B, our buddy, the great Dan Silver, is on a work assignment tonight. He can't make it. So why don't you give us an opening remarks or statement about what you got on your mind?
Well, what had to be done with Frost and Farabee had to be done. And I'm sure that's not the last of it. You know, we got some cap space. I'm looking forward to talking to DB about that. You know, now is this go for broke kind of season now, especially if he can move a couple more salaries. You never know. And he's got some trade chips with all these picks. So wonderful to hear. I always like it because it's an outside opinion, and we get a purist, not a whole bunch of homers cashing in on trying to what to say here. So very looking forward to hear from him.
Yeah, Philadelphia might be a little bit parochial, but joining us from thefourthperiod.com, hot stove powered by TFP on Sirius XM Radio, and of course, Kings of the Podcast, Dennis Bernstein joins us. DB, thanks for coming on.
Oh, great to be here, and Chef. And since I'm aware of the moment, I know how to spell Eagles. Unlike your mayor, it's E-E-L-E-S. And as a Rams fan, The best team won, but happy to talk puck with you. What's going on with the Flyers and around the league?
You got it. So, DB, we have the Four Nations tournament. Has everybody captivated, or maybe not? I've heard statements like, "Well, it's better than the All-Star game." So,
It is. That's a fair statement.
yeah, and it's kind of like an entree back into the international scene in anticipation of next year of the Olympics next year.
Yeah, and look, here's the thing. The players have wanted this for over a decade, right? It was part of the CBA conversations and everything. So this starts the international calendar again. And, it's Connor McDavid's never played an international game, like as a pro. There you go. He's been in the league 9 years. So it's something where if you don't think it's your cup of tea, and look, I'll be totally transparent. I'm covering it for SiriusXM and for fourth period. It's a made-up tournament. Yeah, it is, right? 4 teams. It could have been 6, could have been 8, could have been 10. Right? So, but you know what? Don't tell me that if you're a hockey fan on Saturday night at Bell Center, U.S. Canada, you're not watching that game. Because if you're not watching the game, unless you got a really good excuse, then you're not really a hockey fan. So that's it. And if it comes back around it in Boston, that's the final 2 teams, which it may or may not be. Like, you'll watch that game too. So I think it's great. I think the players want to do it. And, look, I know one guy definitely wants to play, and that's Drew Doughty, right? Drew here in Los Angeles. Yep. And, he went on like about a week ago and said, I really, really, really want to play in this tournament. He's the only guy that ever said that. Like, so when people were wondering if he was going to be named to the tournament or what, I mean, come on. Like, Pietrangelo had announced that he wasn't playing in the Four Nations about 2 weeks ago. And they never named a replacement. Yet they had Tanev. They had Uyghur. They had Bouchard. And they didn't name a replacement. Why? Because they were waiting to make sure that Drew, was healthy and played through games and stuff. So I think it's going to be very exciting hockey because this is something the players want. Yes, the league made it up with the PA, but it's something the players have wanted for a long time. And, when you see, Sid, and when you see Nathan McKinnon on the third line as a center behind Sid and Connor, you want to watch that tournament. I know I do.
Good response there, Chef.
Now, I profess my, like, I'm looking forward to it. I'm one of those people that's actually looking forward to it because I think if you're a fool, if you're not the NHL to really expand your, they got the new deals, the TV deals the last couple of years. They'd be stupid to go into another lame ass all-star game or whatever when you can do something like this, because this is, you want people out there to, like, you're marketing your game. And every time, you do this, and if you, without having the Olympics every 4 years and let your guys go and do that, you're not exposing the next generation to hockey. And, because more people are willing to watch the Olympics than they are to watch a hockey game anymore, over the years. So you've just broadened your audience by like 5%. That's 5% or 2% or whatever it is. You've increased that audience. So, am I wrong to think that this is probably one of the best marketing gigs that they're going to get until they get to the Olympics?
Yeah, Chef. Both networks that have rights are covering this. It's not just an exclusive to ESPN or TNT and TBS. They're both covering games. So, of course, for the States, it's way better. Right. And you're going to get the viewership in Canada regardless. Right. That's it. But when you talk about expanding the game, you're really talking about, look, I might be a little bit chauvinistic, like that, making it the bigger market in the U.S. Right. So if some kid who hasn't watched the game or watched it casually sits down and watches, Connor McDavid versus Austin Matthews, it might become a hockey fan, might become a bigger hockey fan. We'll certainly sell gear and tickets and everything like that. So what's the downside to this? The only downside, Chef and I, is injuries. If a prominent player, I remember going back when Tavares got hurt way back, right? That if there's a significant injury to a player, then of course, you shouldn't have played. Well, there's always a risk of injury, right? When the Edmonton Oilers play the San Jose Sharks, that's a game they're going to win, and they get hurt in that game. Nobody says anything. So I think that's the only downside. But to your point, Chef, this is how you expand the game. This is why there's going to be keep on stadium series. Why they're going to do the global series. Why they went to Australia. Right, you want to expand the game. Now it's a little bit of a tax on the players, but I agree with you one thing, Shark. The anticipation for this is the 100 or 270 degrees from the All-Star game. The All-Star game is a big party for the players to go, and so players don't want to go, and I get it. And it's a boring watch for the fans. They have to reimagine it somehow, and it's going to come back. Promises were made, Chef. When the Islanders got that new arena, Long Island, UBS, They got problems in an All-Star game. So it's going to continue to happen. The frequency will be less, but it opens the door for, like you mentioned, the Olympics. And then behind that, the World Cup of Hockey. So again, there's a very, very limited downside to this. This only can enhance and help the game.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we look forward, DB, we have what has turned out to be, according to your buddy Gary Lawless, 2 tranches of a trade deadline. I think that's very well put by him. And the first one was very active, not only with Frost and Farabee, but Mikko Rantanen and Marty Necas going back with Jack Drury, JT Miller, Marcus Pettersson, and so on and so forth. And then we have this break, and then we were expecting more activity, and like there's no trade deadline, freeze. So
no, there's no freeze. No, they can make deals left and right. Yeah.
I mean, the initial read on that was that they're not gonna have if they have a big deal in place, they might not have the announcement like during the game or on a major game day or something like that.
Sure.
I don't know. What's your read on that?
I don't think a GM stops from making a trade announcement because of the 4 nations. Right, because you usually make the announcement during the day and the games are at night. So how's that going to interfere? If anything, it gives you more impetus to talk about it before the game starts on a pregame. We're going to be doing part of the pregame coverage. All right, so I don't think that's the case at all. And you know what? I was pissed off last Friday night when they didn't make a big trade. That was 2 Friday nights in a row they made a big trade. I was like, where's the big trade before a hot stove show? I didn't have one. So yeah, I think. Look, here's the thing. Like if you don't think any trades are going to happen during this break, when the Kings played the Canadians on Wednesday night in LA, there were 27 scouts at the game. All right. They weren't there just for the weather because it was raining that night. Right. So they weren't out there for the great weather we have here in Los Angeles. So yeah, of course stuff's going to happen. There's going to be talks. It's the perfect time to do it. And yeah, there is 2 trade deadlines. This one right now that's going on right now. And then March 7th, which really helps these teams because you can't tell me that all the scouts, and it's not just me in LA. Our buddy Tab Bamford in Chicago, our guy in Boston, Soren Hutchin, they've listed scouts. There's a ton of scouts out everywhere. They're not doing it for the health of the freaking flyer miles. They're doing it because anticipation. And look, it won't be that far away from March 7th once we resume play. But again, there's nothing stopping. There's no trade freeze. It's not like the holiday freeze. You can do whatever you want. There was activity today. Andreas England got claimed from the Kings by the Predators. So yeah, I think there'll be at least one more big deal happening because you want to get the player in now, right? And so he can start with the practices once we come out of this break, and you can join the team. So yeah, I think the opportunistic teams that are aggressive will go after it and get it done before March 7th.
Yeah, Chef.
So, looking down here, do you see any big winners or losers or whatever? I'm sure we'll get into the specifics of a couple of the Flyers trades there, but anybody out there that you see that or anything that kind of surprised you or took you out of left field?
Well, I think the Rantanen trade. I mean, when you look at the reaction, and only from a player reaction, like it's like Nathan McKinnon's dog died when that trade happened, right? I mean, you took a guy who scored 55 goals on that team away from him. This guy was a core player, and I get it. You couldn't sign him. And the problem is, like, there's an artificial cap in Colorado with Nathan McKinnon because he's at 12.6. Until Cale Makar's contract comes, and what are you going to pay him? 14 or 50? So what are you going to pay this guy? 14? You could do it. Now, here's the issue, guys. We talk about the salary cap going up to 95, and then if that 2 years from now, 110 million, I was shocked. Not everybody's going to pay 110 million. You're not all going to the cap. There's going to be an internal cap. And unfortunately for Avs fans, there's an internal cap, right? There's a limit and a ceiling to what you could pay Mikko Rantanen. The good news is you got a damn good player in Martin Necas. He's really, really good. And he's played better than Rantanen in Colorado. He's been the better player in the trade. Now, the best player in the trade is Mikko Rantanen, and I assume he's going to score some big goals for Carolina in the playoffs, right? So that was a trade that was necessary, right? The JT Miller trade had to be done. It had nothing to do with salary cap or term or anything like that. That room was bad. He had to get out of there. He's the guy that had to get out of there for obvious reasons because he's a tough guy and he's not the easiest guy to get along. So are there real losers? I don't think so. Now, here's the thing. You would think that Vancouver would be worse without JT Miller. He hasn't been. And they haven't been worse with Quinn Hughes with his injuries, he's now going to miss the 4 nations. So I would think in the long term, Vancouver isn't as good, Chef. They're not. They can't be. Like, I like Hedel, but he's had concussion issues. He's not the player. He's not the driver that JT Miller is. Now, he might fit in well with that team as a number 2 behind Elias Pettersson. But when you have to trade a 100-point player off the team because of personality issues, that's never a good sign. I think there's some dysfunction in the entire organization in Vancouver because it's kind of weird out there. So I think that would be it. The Vancouver Canucks can't be better without JT Miller than they were before the trade. So I think the one loser would be Vancouver right now.
One quick follow-up. You had mentioned the cap ceiling and how surprised you were it went up to 110. But lest we forget now, the floor came up too, and the floor is coming up. How is that going to play into some of these smaller markets now? Do you think that is this going to make, let's say, Flyers have Ryan Ellis's contract? It's a dead contract. Yeah. Is this going to make it easier for maybe the Flyers to move somebody, move some dead salary and help other guys get the floor?
To get to the floor only with teams like super rebuilding, Chef, because like the floor is pretty low, right? And so you have to be paying players. Like your top player might be making to get to that to be below the floor. You're not paying anybody $8 or $9 million. You're paying guys $4 or $5 million. So other than maybe a San Jose or I can't even think of another team. So I don't think that's going to affect it. Like it's not like it was a couple of years ago when you saw that a lot. With Pronger's contract and Datsu's contract. Yeah. I think that's becoming less and less. Could it happen as a one-off? It could, but it had to be a really bad team that hasn't spent any money on anybody. I just don't foresee that happening. I think that's a thing of probably the past and not the future in the NHL.
Okay.
Yeah, the floor, the spread is as much as $30 million between the floor and the ceiling. So it's going to be real tough, especially in 2028. Yeah,
for sure.
So I think you make a good point there. So if people go to the fourthperiod.com and they click on the trade watch list and it's a 3.0. So if you go through that, we're not going to go through every player here. The people can check that out, and by all means they should. Do you still think Elias Pettersson is a trade candidate? Are they in a trial period, or does the JT Miller trade signify that he's the guy, we're going to run with him at least for the rest of this season?
The rest of the season, but off season? I don't know. Is he the driver? I think it's not. Look, I won't say this is a trial period for Elias Pettersson, right? Because he's an established star, he's getting paid a ton of money. But let's say how he reacts, right? If JT Miller was truly the problem, Isaiah, then Elias Pettersson down the stretch would go off. He should be one of the best players in the league. Is he? I don't know. Did you watch the playoffs last year? He wasn't. He was overpaid based on his playoff performance. I think the jury's still out. Do I think it could happen here at the deadline? No, but he's still a high value. If there's any consideration for trading this player, he's at the top of our list, right? That's how we rank it. So I it depends how they finish. Like, because here's the reality of it. Even without JT Miller, Vancouver should beat out Calgary for the last wild card spot. They should. Like, Calgary's had a nice story, but they don't score any goals. And Dustin Wolf's carrying this team. Can he carry them down stretch? I guess you could, but I'm not closing the door on anything Vancouver does right now, including trading Elias Pettersson, because, again, let's say they do make the playoffs and they get swept in 4 and he does nothing. Like, would you consider trading that player? I think 2 bad playoffs in a row. Yeah, I'd really think hard about it if it was Alvin, and it's not really Alvin, it's really Rutherford. And here's the thing. That's the thing. A guy who's willing to take risks and be aggressive in the trade market, the top of this is probably Jim Rutherford. So you can't say, all right, you traded JT Miller, he's over with. No, I don't think so. It's just the opposite. Is he going to – the question is he going to still consider trading Elias Pettersson, really reformulating this team? Because that team, even though they had 2 great 100-point players, they weren't a great success in the playoffs, right? Now, granted, Demko was hurt. So I think the jury's still out on Elias Pettersson staying long-term in Vancouver.
Yeah, they're in a tough spot with Demko. It's a shame. He's a really talented guy. He put his time in the minors. He seemed to be really poised to
gets banged up a lot. Now it's going on with Ullmark in Ottawa too. Like, he played great and they were on a run. Then he got hurt and then he stopped scoring goals. So yeah, I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility, because here's the real reality. I've talked about this on the show before. 99% of the players get talked about. 1% get traded. That's the reality of it. So when we put up this list, right? Okay, you might have 5 or 6 or 7 players be traded. The top 2 or 3 guys are going to get traded. No, but here's the other thing that people have to understand. It's not necessarily Elias Pettersson. It's the middle mark. It's the middle 6 guys. Like, and Jeff, to your point about the salary cap going up, like if you had a guy like Brian Rust, I'll give you an example. who you might have a trouble fitting him in in your salary cap this year, but with the cap going to 95 and then to 110, you can easily, if you can make him fit this year, you could easily fit him on the back end. So I think what you see with respect to the trade market, you might see is more guys making $4 to $6 million a year that have term that you would say, oh, he can't fit, it's term. Now, a $5 million player isn't that expensive anymore, guys. We're getting to that point. So the guys who were signed on deals like Russ a couple of seasons ago that were, not top of the market, but certainly a little bit more costly, they're not costly anymore. So the guys with term that are at $4 to $6 million a year, you can see a lot of movement from those players.
Yeah. Before we get to the Flyers, I just wanted to hone in on one thing from the list. If there's one team that has a sense of desperation, maybe more than any other team, it seems to be the Buffalo Sabres, whether it's Dylan Cousins or defensemen like Owen Power, Byram, Bowen Byram. Right. It seems like they really are itchy to make a move. And yet on the other hand, they're just terrified of making a mistake because so many players have left the organization and have prospered.
Well, the way you prevent making a mistake, Isaiah, is to get a different general manager, because this guy hasn't done the job. He's done a lousy job, right? 13 seasons, and it's been different general managers. I get it, but you have 2 first overall picks on the blue line, and you're not great defensively. You bring back Lindy Ruff. All right, I guess. Yeah, familiarity breeds contempt, right? You have guys, and you mentioned all the guys, the litany of guys that have left and won the Stanley Cup. Ryan O'Reilly, Brendan Montour, Jack Eichel, right? And they got good players back. I love Alex Tuck, and I'm not going to trade Alex Tuck, but he's not Jack Eichel, and Peyton Krebs flamed out. So, I think that they're desperate, but nothing they do right now, Isaiah, is going to make them make the playoffs, right? So this is so if I'm Pegula, and here's the thing about the ownership, right? And I know people always say, oh, the manager and ownership, they really screwed this up. They also own the Buffalo Bills. And the last time I checked, the Buffalo Bills are a pretty good team, a pretty good organization. So you can't say it's the ownership approach. It's the manager. It's the owner that picked a manager who didn't really have the chops and the experience. He was the finance guy. He was running Harborside. Yeah. He wasn't running, right? He didn't come as an assistant GM that made trades or like an Eric Tulsky who got promoted. So that's part of the issue. But they're a desperate team. And I always joke, every night before I go to sleep, I say a novena for Sabres fans because they deserve a lot better. But my prayers never seem to work, guys. So I think this is a situation where if I'm the ownership, I've got to look really – I want to have a last right of approval on any trade they make because all the trades have been bad, right? Except for maybe the Tage Thompson trade, right, which that they lucked out on that one because Tage just emerged down there. So you can have a player emerge in Buffalo. You can. It's one guy did it, right? So, but with all that's going on, I'll put a pause on everything. If you get it, look, if somebody wants to give 3 first-round picks for Dylan Cousins, you make the trade right away. I would be very patient if I'm ownership and say, okay, let us see the trade you want to make, maybe, and we got less right of refusal. I think that massive change that has to come in the offseason. So you might see a Dylan Cousins go. I don't think you trade one of those 2 defensemen at this point in time. The first overall picks, maybe Byron, but you just got Byron in a couple of years. I think there's not enough talent on that team. It's always guys. It's always the depth. It's always the middle 6 guys. Like you have 1 or 2 guys at the top of the line. Great, they produced. Tage Thompson's a monster. It's always that middle 6. And what Kevin Adams hasn't done, he hasn't got the middle pair defenseman. He hasn't got the middle 60, and that's a massive task. I wouldn't trust them with that team right now, and I think they would make a trade make a change in the front office once we get to the end of the season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Shep, if you have any more, because I'm going to move to the Flyers, but if you have anything,
this kind of pertains to the Flyers too. Mm-hmm. So you were talking about how those $5 million, $6 million contracts are going to become palatable now because of cap going up and such. And I always said with Ristolainen on the Flyers that contract's going to age a lot better than it really is right now because the cap had to go up eventually, at least a little bit significantly. So now is you hear him being, I know he's a little bit hurt, banged up right now, nothing serious apparently, but is his name getting thrown around a lot out there because he fits that category? He's got a year left. It's good. You can try him out for a whole season after this playoff run if he goes somewhere with the playoffs. Yeah. And we all been itching for him to get in a playoff run to see what he could do, and this will be his first one if he gets traded to a team. Is his name out there? Is this a big? Is he a big want?
I don't think he's a big one, but you're right. And I think he has 2 years left on his deal. He's
2
30
left,
years
yeah.
old.
2 years.
Yeah, 2 years old at 5.1. And he's played well. That's the thing. He's played pretty good. Now it depends on which Flyer fan you ask that, but like he's played in the range of that salary, right, of that cap hit. So I haven't heard a lot about him. You hear more about the Scott Laughlin's. Obviously, that's one guy that's has been out there, and you assume Kuzmenko is going to move at the deadline, right? Which he was basically throwing in. I go back. Kuzmenko scored 39 goals in this league once. Like that's his first year in Vancouver, like 39 goals. Now he's not that guy anymore. So I don't think a lot, Chef, but I think that off season, because here's the thing, right? How much salary cap space do they have right now? Like, I don't know, $17 million in cap
Something
space.
like that.
Right. And if I'm trading Ristolainen, right, I'm not trading for, you guys have 7 picks in the first 2 rounds, right? You trade him for another player. I would trade him for an offensive player. I trade him for a middle 6 player. That's what I would do. So I don't think he's like at the top of the list, because I think they're a team. Look, you always look talking about center, Chef, at the trade deadline. Who can we put in the middle that can help us down the middle? Because that's how you win. You still win with down the middle. Like that's why Nashville sucks this year. Their number 1 center is a 3C, Ryan O'Reilly. So if I had to trade for a comparable player who was a scorer for Philly to trade Ristolainen, I would do it. Like, do I see it at deadline? I don't. But if there's an injury in the last 2 weeks before the trade deadline, could you see it move? Yeah. I don't think he's number 1 on the hit list when they call up Danny Briere to talk trade.
So you think, as we move along and we look at, somebody like Scott Laughton, there have been some rumors and some talk that he's a guy that is starting to gather interest once again, because like every year it's the same thing. First, it was like, oh, should we sign him? Then they re-sign him for $3 million a year for a longer term contract. And now he's just got I think he's got 1 more year left at that number. Yep. So the thing is, he has a very high intangible value, a very value guy in the room. And he's also but it also has a attractive quality to a playoff team that's looking to get, check some of those boxes for intangibles for a playoff run.
Yeah. And that's why you see like in Montreal with Jake Evans. Jake Evans is a 3C, but he's getting a lot of action because you need a 3C to win a championship. You do, right? So yeah. And Scott Laughton's, here's what you have. Scott Laughton's one of these guys that will drag your team into the fight, right? And they're asking for a 1st-round pick now. What are you going to do with that 4th first-round pick? Well, I'm sorry. Let's put it this way, guys. Let's say they did that. Let's say they traded Scott Laughton for a 1st-round pick. I don't think anybody would take this bet that they would make all 4 picks, right, when we get to June. Like they're not making all. So you're accumulating assets to make a big trade. Because if I'm them, I'm trading 2 of these 1st-round picks. Because look, the 2 picks they got, I think, are 22 and 30 right now. If you trade them to, I don't know, let's say LA. LA's going to be in the 20s. So you got 3 picks in the 20, maybe 30, right? What's that going to do for this team right now? Nothing.
Well, I have a thought about that. What if the Flyers started deferring some of these draft picks to future years because they have a plan to use an offer sheet and they want to offset some of the loss of picks that they're going to have to give up, maybe to that level of offer sheet. And maybe that's kind of like the big picture for the Flyers. They move on from Frost and Farabee, and this is their way of saying, look, we're cutting bait here. We don't see these guys in the big picture, but now we also want to get off the treadmill of being a playoff pretender, and we'd like to be a real contender, at least as a playoff contender next year. We owe that to the fans. We owe that to the guys in the room. They've been blocking shots and putting up with torches crap for going into year number 4. So we've been wondering along with you what they're going to do with those picks. We're wondering if they don't swap them out for 26s and 27s as, like I said, offsets for having to getting rid of their own picks if they make an offer sheet. At least give them the flexibility.
Yeah. Well, you have to use your own picks on the offer sheet. Here's the challenge.
Right.
This year, right now, it's a 6th overall pick. I know it's not a great draft, but you better get a real quality player.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to give the 6th overall pick, like you better get a guy who's going to, if it's a forward, he better be a 25 to 30 goal scorer. Like if you're going to use that pick, right? And in subsequent seasons, yeah, but you're right. It gives you cover if you did make that move this year. If you draft like, 20, let's say 21st and 30th, and you did trade Scott Lawton for, to LA, and that's a 23rd overall pick, right? So you have 3 picks in the 20s, which you could package. You could move up to maybe mid. Now, if you're going to do this, you could, because the draft isn't that great. Yeah. So yes, they could do that. I'm not certain that I'm still not certain that a lot of GMs are going to weaponize offer sheets. Because remember who used that offer sheet? Doug Armstrong, one of the most aggressive GMs in the league, without question, right? I don't see, more conservative GMs doing that, because I still think this is part of the country club that doesn't want, I want to do it to that guy because he might do it to me. So yes, you could do it in future years. It depends on how aggressive you want to be this season, and what's the player you're going to get. Who are you going to offer sheet? Like, who's going to be available? That's the other question. But yes, that could happen because there's a lot of assets. Like I said, they're not making all 7 picks in these 2 rounds, but go get quality players.
Right. I mean, they have openly stated they want a center, and
they need a center. Yeah, no
they
question.
need centers desperately, and they have Lachenko coming up. I think Lachenko's got a ceiling as a second. I'm a little bit
he's
concerned.
Not a number one.
No, he's not a number one, and he may only be a number 3 at the NHL level, especially if they rush him like they rush Couturier. Yeah. But so I mean, when you think of the Philadelphia Flyers, and you look at where they're at and this move they make when you heard that they traded Frost and Farabee, and you heard about the compensation. So what went across? What did you think of? Okay, they're doing this. Their timeline is X, and what were you thinking?
Here's my thinking, and it has nothing to do with the current regime, right? Yeah. Back-to-back first-round picks get traded. Like, when has that ever happened? And so the question is, and it's the priority. Like, so my concern is, when you draft in the future, what's going on in Philadelphia? Is it they can't identify the right player at a high pick, or the development's not good? One of these 2 things have to be true. Either you pick the wrong guy at that spot, and granted, like, they weren't like 2nd and 3rd overall picks, but that never happens. I don't ever recall that ever happening. Now, it's a new regime, new eyes, it's different now. That's my concern now if I'm a Flyers fan. When they make these picks, do they know what they're doing? Like, are they picking the right guys, and are they developing the right guy? That was the first thing I'm saying. Like, I've never heard of that before. And granted, it was warranted because those guys didn't develop. They didn't. So it was smart to move on from them. And that's the one thing about Jonesy and Briere. They're men of action. Like, they'll move like, okay, this is not working. We've got to move on from these guys. In season trade, and something that's really, be frank, is unprecedented. The question is now, like, I get it. They're clearing space for better players. What they're doing. It's what they have to do. So their approach is going to be really aggressive, I think, in the offseason, because you lost those 2 players. You got to play them, and you're not going to replay them from inside. Like, who's going to replace them inside? Right. So I think it's a move to just clear the decks, and let's get really aggressive. If you're a Flyers fan, you got to hope and maybe be excited about aggressiveness in the offseason now. You cleared out some, I won't say dead wood, because these players are playing in Calgary, but you played 2 guys that underachieved. That's, I guess, the best word, as first-round picks. And then you try to improve the talent on this team, because, I don't think it's a structure thing. I don't think it's an organizational thing. It's clearly one thing. There's not enough talent on this team.
Yeah, definitely. Chef?
You can lay out and block shots and be committed to defense and all this other stuff. And I don't know which one of these goalies is going to be the goalie. Maybe you got to they got 3 guys who, I don't know. Maybe you got to look at a 4th goal.
The best guy they have is one of Zvragin is over in the KHL. He's actually one of the top 5 prospects, probably in the entire league. But he's like 3 years away. So they need to fill the gap of about 2 or 3
Nobody cares
years.
about fans don't care about some fans care about 3 years away.
Right.
Because God forbid you should trade a prospect ever. I hear it all the time in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Right. Oh no, please, you can't trade that guy. Okay, sure. All these guys getting waived, like Kaliev got waived, and all this other stuff. So I think that the team is I think the organization has set up the table for this team to be more successful. And to be honest with you, it's a bad year. You're behind the Canadians, 52 games in, when nobody had the Canadians there. Like, you're ahead of the Sabres. That's it. Bad year. But I think they're clearing the decks to be aggressive and add talent to this team, because that's what they need to do. They need talent on this team.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'll kind of lead in. Well, I will say I loved Farabee as a player. Of the idea of Farabee somewhere along the line they mismanaged him. They didn't really develop him like they should. I think it's more like you said. It was about developing, not necessarily identifying players with potential. Let's just say so. But speaking to a timeline, if we're going to say we traded this, we're in this timeline, and here's something I haven't heard anybody even speak to yet. You got a lame duck coach coming up. Does he get that extension now? Because you basically kind of pushed it to 2 years, or is there enough room to actually make a difference and say, hey, we're a bubble team next year? They're right in that sweet spot. I believe.
Chef,
it's hard to sell.
I want to give the guy more horses, and that's been always the issue. Can he coach really talented players? Well, he won a Stanley Cup. He got the Rangers to the conference final, so he can coach really talented players. I would like to see this coach. And look, I'm a fan of the coach. I was in Tampa the year before he won. It was great to me, like the 6 months I spent with him. So I think you want to give him more horses, Chef. So I think that I think next season is the defining season because this team is devoid of talent. It really is. It is. The talent isn't good enough. So I like to see John have more talent, and then you can make a call on him. So I don't think that the performance of this team wants him not coming back next season. I think he got the most out of him he could. The Michkov thing back and forth. Who did you think that was going to happen? Of course it was going to happen.
Yeah.
Of course it was going to be. And look, as a connection, I want to make one connection to LA. When Brant Clark got scratched for 2 games, everybody went nuts. It's his first year. And it's the first full season in the league. Everybody went crazy. Like they're ruining Brant Clark. They're ruining him. I'm like, well, let me see the other 2 guys who got scratched, young guys. Will Smith in San Jose. Oh, what about Michkov? Didn't Michkov get scratched 2 games in Philly early in the season? Yep. Did it ruin him? No, it didn't ruin him.
So it's best game of the year. Yeah. It's past week. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, if Michkov goes to Jonesy and Briere and says, I don't like the coach, he won't be coaching next year. But I don't think that's the case. So I would just like to see Tortorella get more talent on this team and then make a decision on his tenure after next season.
Makes sense. Question. Last one from me, DB. If you had to pick a player on your mind, someone people know, big name, you think could get moved, who do you? It's like that guy's getting traded. Who would you pick one? If you got 2, give us 2.
Well, it depends on one team. It depends on what the Islanders do here down the stretch, right? I think because I don't think they're a playoff team, but they've been playing better. They've had 6 out of 8 or something like that. The guy I think would make a big difference would be Brock Nelson. Like Minnesota. He's from Minnesota. Like they need a 2C. Dallas could use him. Like Boston could definitely use him. Toronto. I mean, you look at the list that we listed TFP. Toronto. Colorado is a natural there. They don't have a 2C. They demoted Casey Middlestat to a 3C.
Middlestat, yeah.
Yeah. And remember last year, and it's great. And I'll go to this one team, Winnipeg. Now, Winnipeg had Nemeshkov as a 2C, and they love him. We had Scott O'Neill I was on with Koulias on the power play. He loves Nemeshkov. They've done a great job. They're first in the league. What did they do last year when Nemeshkov was a 2C? They traded for Sean Monahan. So the one guy who could go out and get a nice return for the Islanders would be Brock Nelson. He can make a difference. He could win a team a championship because, as we talked about, you win with centers. He's a 2C. Imagine Brock Nelson behind McKinnon in Colorado, or Brock Nelson behind Scheifele in Winnipeg. Like it's going to make a difference. So that's it. So, or Brock Nelson behind Roope Hintz in Dallas. Like that would be the one guy that I would come up with that I think is a really, I think he's a goner if they don't wake up. And then the other player would be, I don't know. That's the one guy that comes to mind. That's like a top guy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, sure. That makes sense. I mean, to resign him at this point, I mean, Lou does what Lou wants to do, right? But it just doesn't make sense for a guy that age unless he's getting one of those legacy contracts where I want to retire an Islander, kind of deal,
Yeah. Well, here's the thing: if you trade him, I always say, you can trade him and bring him back in the summer. Guys never come back. Like I think there's like I think Nick Bjugstad went back once when Edmonton traded him or something like that. That guys don't come back. So if you're trading Brock Nelson, and of course he's from Minnesota, and remember Minnesota,
Well,
you talk about aggressive teams. They're losing that $14 million buyout for those two
Justin
players.
Braun came back.
Yeah,
The
Justin
Flyers.
Braun came back. There you go.
Yeah,
Okay, there's
woo,
two.
woo.
Okay, right, exactly. The guys that came back, exactly.
Yeah.
Like probably one
So-
of the Shen brothers came back. One of the, like Luke Shen might have come back. But so that's it. And watch for Minnesota because that the buyouts for Parisi and Suter go away. They have 14 million now. And I joke with Bill Guerin when we talk to him on Sirius XM. All that money's got to go to Kaprizov. Yeah, the Kaprizov, right? So but that could be a team that could be aggressive. So I think Brock Nelson could be, and he's definitely a difference maker. He's a really, really good player. So if the Islanders fall out, or let's say they're 8 or 10 points out of a playoff spot at on March 6th, I think you could see Brock Nelson going. And the other guy that could probably go off the Islanders would be Palmieri, but he's not. He's a cut below what Brock Nelson could give a team.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, positionally as well. So
last one for me.
One?
Yeah, last one for me. Chefs like coaches are often either loved or hated, and they basically get that same thing. So I want to ask you about the survey about the coaches through the league, and our boy Torts, he was most hated or not wanted to play for, but he was also one of the ones that they wanted to play for too.
Yeah.
One top ones. So is that a testament? How do you view that? Like if you're both at the same time, you're the villain, you're somebody's villain and somebody's hero. How do you take that as an owner, or as somebody looking to hire somebody like that?
Well, I'm a polarizing guy myself, so I like polarizing guys. Here's what it tells me, Chef. The guys willing to pay the price said they love him. The guys that weren't willing to pay the price don't love him. That's what happens. And you know what? I've always said, Coach, your hardest teachers in school were the toughest, right? Yep. They were the best teachers. And so he's won a championship. Like, he's a really good coach. And I get it. He's not for everyone. But sometimes you need tough love. And maybe if you took that poll 10 years ago, because it's a generational thing too, right? Players got to be coddled a little bit more now. They have more control. Yeah. They speak their minds more often. And I always remember Brian Burke telling us, I was on a show with Brian Burke, he said, back in the day, like, players have changed. Like, before, you would tell and it's just generational. If you would tell a soldier to go take the hill, he takes the hill. That's 20 years ago. Now, you need to tell him why he takes the hill, why it's important, what the next move is. He needs to be explained about stuff. It's a different generation now. So all the kids have phones. They're more savvy and they're more educated. And so there's more questions. So there's more propensity to say, I don't like that coach. And, and the players have more power now. So I'm not shocked by that. But it just tells me that some players love them and some players' careers have lasted longer because of him, right? Because every players have favorites, right? It's like, you don't, right? So everybody's not treated, everybody's treated. Todd McClellan had a great line with respect to coaches. He treats everyone fairly, but not everyone equally, because different players have different levels. So I think what you will find, Chef, you probably find the bottom 6 guys on that list, and the top 6 guys probably said they didn't like him. That's what I think. Right. So that's why that's why the Flyers, they're not stuck where the way they are, but look at the team they have. They're a grinding team. They're foot soldiers, right? That's what they are. And and I've always said this, you want that type of personality in your city, right? You don't want a soft team. You don't want a team that doesn't work hard. Right. And I remember, talking to you guys 2-3 years ago when Yo was the coach, what that was, right? It was embarrassing. I came on the show and said, I felt bad to have 6,000 people. Well, look, I went to Ryder. I grew up in Central Jersey. Like, I was there during the Cup. Like, I was a Flyers fan back then. I was in college, right? To see 6,000 people at Wells Fargo 3 years ago, not caring about this team. Yeah. That broke my heart. And if you're a Flyers fan, it had to break your heart. And I get it. Like, if you don't want to go to games because the team sucked, they weren't trying, you got every right not to go. But you need that personality in this city. Right? Because now what are people saying now based off of last night, right? What have I heard? Philly's the best sports town in the U.S. And it very well may be, but you got to be a certain type of team. And I go to the Eagles. Like, Jalen Hurts, he played great. He's not a superstar. He isn't. Like Saquon Barkley is. But all these guys are grinders. You had a guy, the middle linebacker, who was a special teams guy, who's now a starting linebacker, was a star in the game. Like, this is what Philly wants, right? Yep. So you have to be mindful of that. right? I think for this market and to sell tickets and to bring people back in the building. That's it. So that's how I look at it, Chef. I'm not surprised. I just think it's the mold of the player that John Tortorella wants. He wants you to pay the price and give 110% every game. And not every player wants to do that. So he says, screw that guy. He's not a great coach. I would never want to play for him.
Great analysis.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, DB, I really appreciate you coming on tonight. Definitely have to talk to you down the road very soon. Where can people catch up with you on social and maybe some events you got coming up?
Well, if you can't find me, it's your fault. That's what I'll say to fans. Because I'm probably everywhere. So let's see. Dennis TFP is my X handle. We'll be doing Sirius XM from Four Nations. Why I'm leaving 70-degree weather to go to -5 degree and snow in Montreal tells you about my commitment. You talk about player commitment, guys. How about reporter commitment? So we're going to be at Four Nations, both in Philadelphia and both in Montreal and Boston. And then leading up to the trade deadline, visit the fourth period, me, Dave Pagnotta, our network of writers. Sirius XM, I occasionally host with Steve Coolies on the Power Play from 3 to 6 Eastern. And then our show, Hot Stove, is on from 11 to 1 Eastern every Saturday with me, Dave, and Ryan Payton.
Super. And it's a great show. I never missed that one.
Thank you.
Even available on replay if you do. So
yes, that's right. On the app, the award-winning app, guys.
Yeah, that's a great app. It's good.
If you know how to work it, I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah, just get on your phone.
We'll get one of these young kids to do that.
Yeah, exactly. That's what you do. Some 19-year-old to help you out and say, here, press this button for sure.
So, DB, thanks again, man.
Always great being on O&B. Thanks for the time, boys. Appreciate it.
Right. You take care.
Yeah,
right.
Cheers.
Yeah. So, Chef DB enlightening us with his outlook and years of experience as a top pundit, not only for just as a league observer, but particularly with regard to the trade market, because you have outsized expectations. Mm-hmm. It doesn't sound like though that he expects a super busy trade deadline. It seems like most of the big names have already, have left the nest. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I kind of got the impression that he thinks it's going to be more bottom six guys moving all over the place. That's what kind of like I inferred, maybe with a couple higher moves here and there. But other than that.
Yeah, like Brock Nelson or maybe John Gibson finally finds a home leaving Anaheim, but we'll see. So before we get into what occurred with the home team, I wanted to touch base on a tweet that was sent out by our buddy Raider Frank.
Yes.
Who he posted an interview that was on Sportsnet with a guy I generally like, Scott Oak, and some other guy I've never heard of. They both work for that network, Sportsnyet, as I call them, Ryan Leslie. And they were talking with Morgan Frost, Joel Farabee, and they're literally baiting them time and time again to say something bad about John Tortorella. And during the interview, they're using like a split screen or a cutaway showing Tortorella screaming at the players or getting upset. I mean, it's just they hate John Tortorella, and it was so amateurish to editorialize to that degree. And I mean, they really look like a-holes. I can't say it any other way.
Yeah. It was kind of like, it was like you expect this from like not people of that caliber that you expect that from like cheap little podcasts or one-hit wonders or whatever. I mean, look, like Frank is a guy that knows his stuff too. And that's a good thing about this fan base here. They're not stupid. And people like Frank are very well educated in this team, and about the whole business of hockey too. So they're not stupid. And to watch that was it wasn't. And you know what I noticed too? It wasn't just Isaiah. If you notice, it wasn't just about Torts. It was about the whole play in there. in the whole
Right.
Philly
Playing
thing.
in Philadelphia.
So it wasn't just a shot at the coach. It was a shot at the whole system. It was a shot at the whole team. It was a shot at the whole city. And guess what? All right, we're world champs now in football. We're going to get there someday in hockey. But, it's just like, what I don't understand. What is the purpose? What is your end game of doing this too? What's going to happen? So oh yeah, Frost, I hated playing for him. He was so bad, blah, blah. What's that do? What's that do for the two players? And what's it do for the people interviewing too? Does nothing.
It was amateur hour. It really was.
Yeah.
And, I would agree with, I'm just picking Frank out of the other people we retweeted, and I would agree with Frank about everything. He knows that. But yeah, there's a respect there. He is going through the ups and downs of a typical Philly sports fan, and he's learned from it. Like we all have. And I'm glad he pointed that out, because I had only heard about it. I didn't really pay attention to it. When I sat down and I watched that, I mean, this is the kind of stuff you would expect in politics, not in sports. There's the fancy word, tendentious, to say the least. So, yeah, Sportsnyet now. So, you have a standard bearer in Elliot Friedman, right? So, like, why don't you follow that model? Can you imagine him doing something so, I don't know, amateurish?
Yeah.
Or really lowbrow almost, but lowbrow's not really the right, but
Cheap
whatever.
Cheap shotty.
Yeah. Anyway, so maybe, I generally like, everybody. I mean, a lot of those people are ex-CBC people, and when they, when Sportsnyet won the contract to cover their Saturday games. So anyway, moving right along, the Flyers are playing 25 more games, and it starts with Edmonton on the 22nd at home after the tournament. So that's the 22nd. I believe that's a Saturday afternoon. And it's a 1 o'clock, typical 1 o'clock game. It probably will be on the NHL Network, which I don't get. Don't even get me started. Somebody was complaining about how the ratings are really not that great with the NHL. And a lot of it has to do is there's not one centralized outlet that you can get all the games like you used to. And they got some on video. Most of them ESPN Plus or Hulu or whatever, but there's some on TNT and there's regular ESPN,
HBO Max. And there's games on HBO Max too.
Yeah, I can't stand the NHL Network games. If they're gonna have an NHL Network, get it more available. YouTube complain. I was hearing about Bill Matz from PHOY talking about like he I think he has YouTube TV, and you don't even get the NHL Network, and their pricing is increasing. I mean, that sucks.
Well, the thing about it too is, I just said to them, the debate, like, this is your chance to market it, your game, and then you deal with all these there's 6 different platforms that we just said that you have to try to find your game on. It's kind of ridiculous. They need to consolidate that. They need to get in there and like, if you buy a package, get all the games, but make it available for some. Hockey fans, especially people that are transplanted like you. Like you're in Florida watching Philadelphia games, you're gonna follow your team. If it costs whatever it costs, I just want to be able to click on and go, okay, I have all these games. Wait, I have all these, but like the 12 that are on ESPN Plus and the 4 that are on NHL Network. Are you kidding me? It's ridiculous. Just if you buy a team's package, you get the team's package. That's the way it should be.
I have to agree with that. I really do. I think you should get all the games. You pay for them, and it's over. It's a commitment. I'm willing to make it, but don't make me go to some,
that's
Russian
the number one
site
beef,
and then end up on
other people
being clicked to some Russian porn site.
Yeah.
Oh, that reminds me, Ludmilla. What was that? Ludmilla is with one or 2 L's. I forget. No, I'm only kidding.
Oh God.
No, but I mean, you get redirected when you're on there, and it's like you lose the picture. It's really awful.
It's horrible, and the streaming stuff sinks because it's always skipping or pausing out. And I got 5 brothers. We all watch hockey. We're all texting during the games, and I'm texting ahead of them because I'm the one that's still stupid enough to buy the cable because it's a direct line. I get it. It's perfect. I don't miss out on anything. Here, I'm 32 seconds ahead of everybody going, did you see that goal? They're like, yo asshole. Oops, sorry. You know, you're 30 seconds. I'm 30 seconds behind watching on YouTube TV. You know.
Yeah. That was a
So.
great goal. Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
But really, how much different is that than watching the NFL these days? I mean, and we should have mentioned right from the outset, but we had DB on. I didn't want to, go cheer Fly Eagles Fly and all that.
Yeah.
It was great watching the Eagles win a Super Bowl I guess in my lifetime, they've been to 5 Super Bowls and they've won 2 of them now, and 2 out of the last 3. And the big one was with Foles and all that. To break through like that was a big deal.
Yeah.
Nothing, never be anything like that. But there was a tremendous amount of satisfaction for them to take down basically a dynasty in the Chiefs. I mean, you have to give Andy Reid a lot of credit. They got outcoached and outplayed. Like they got their asses kicked from here to the end of the other end of the field last night. But hey,
if you look back on like most of look at all the Flyers. The Flyers every time they went to the Cup since they won the Cup. They ran into a dynasty. So it's nice to be on the other side of something for a change, even if it is football, but still, I'll take it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like if the Flyers had beaten the Edmonton Oilers in '87, which, oh, by the way, if Tim Kerr had played, that might have happened. I'm just saying. Yeah. But I always maintain that, and that makes me feel better. So, congratulations to the Philadelphia Eagles. Well-deserved. And it just goes to show that they had so many weapons. They took Barkley out. They didn't want Carter to beat them, and the other linemen stepped up. The receivers and Hurts was made one mistake. Okay, fine, but they had Mahomes off balance all game. So I don't want to go on and on about football. It was a tremendous night, and it was fantastic to watch a Philadelphia team win yet another team championship. And I was going back and forth a little bit. I had the account last night, the podcast account. The closest, most dominant performance of a Philly team that I can think of is probably the '83 Sixers. That was an all-time great team. And I don't know if the Eagles are quite in that category. Maybe if they come back. I mean, well, they were here 2 years ago. So, I mean, there's something to be said. But you got to win. And, the '83 Sixers were just a fabulous, once-in-a-lifetime team that is comparable, I think, in my lifetime anyway, from 1969 on. From when I followed it. So anyway, congrats. So we move on. The Philadelphia Flyers were 1-2 this week. It was just strange. They didn't play. They ran out of gas in Utah, but they got a point. Mm-hmm. And just when you thought you was going to go into a shootout, Dylan Guenther gets a shot off right before the overtime is about to expire. And it's a damn shame. It was probably, and I agree with Torts, if not the best, one of the best games that I've ever seen Ersan play, or almost any goalie
this year. This year too. The best game this year I've seen, best performance. Yeah,
and it was a damn shame. Then the Flyers play much better against the Caps, dominate statistically. Michkov plays his best game all year, and the Flyers deserve better than a 4-3 regulation loss. But Dotop plays. And frankly, he definitely should have had at least one of those, probably 2. And you got to think if Ersan plays on that night, the Flyers at least get it into overtime. So a little frustrating. And then, of course, the last game where they were completely outplayed with a depleted Penguin squad. No Crosby, no Malkin, no Russ. Russ never sleeps, but apparently he did that night. You get it? Anyway, I'll move on. So they lost 3-2, and they won 3-2. Penguins lost 3-2, but it broke the Flyers' 5-game losing streak. Yes. And again, Ersan was fantastic, and he was really the difference. The Flyers, I mean, they did a little bit better with possession as the game went on, but the Penguins got goalied, and we've been on the other side of that so many times. And we saw Kuzmenko. And what did you think of Andrei Kuzmenko? I'm running at the mouth.
Okay. I liked what I saw. I could see the flashes of why, he scored 39 goals one season, but he's great. He comes on like a ton of bricks, like fireballs this first season at each club. So my concern isn't like maybe not even, this season or halfway through next season. Is he going to fizzle out like he did before? I don't know. I mean, but this is a good audition for him. And if he wants a contract to even play next season, I think the Flyers will be very careful if they do sign him to anything. I mean, if they don't make that big free agent move and they were managed to get somebody else away for a reasonable price, they'll have money to pay him still. I don't know if it'll be like what he got paid in Vancouver and Calgary, but I think there's some. He's at $3.5 million. I could see that, maybe $4 million there, and maybe it works out. Maybe he has a resurgence with Mitchkov, maybe or whatever. But it seems to be like I like what I see so far, but I reserve judgment to see how he's going to carry himself through all the games.
Yeah, no, I definitely see that. I kind of disagree with DB in terms of Kuzmenko. I think he's probably here for the rest of the year. I don't think they're going to flip him. He does have a 12-team no trade list.
Mm-hmm.
So that,
which he waived to come to the Flyers, from what I heard, right? Am I correct?
I think so.
Right.
I think that is correct. So,
which is hard to believe that we're not on that list, being just for the sake of having being in the Met. You think the schedule would be so much better. I figure it makes me think that
being the East Coast in general,
exactly,
with the travel and less taxes, because Canadian dollar you're not getting as much. So
it's crazy.
Yeah. So he took him forever to clear immigration, and Jacob Peltier, who we talked about last show, he couldn't get his paperwork straightened out. I mean, he was able to travel. They were both delayed by a snowstorm. They got through that last Thursday night, and then, he still couldn't get it straightened out to play. Apparently, they're doing what they call extreme vetting or something like that with the new immigration things, with the new administration. That might have something to do with it. Plus the fact that both were Canadian and had never played in an American market.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, okay. I didn't know that part of it.
Yeah, no, with Kuzmenko it's a little bit different because it was Russian, but he had played in a Canadian market only. He had never played in America, so that delayed him. And then Pelletier is a Canadian who had never played in an American market, and those situations complicated. If either one of them had previous American experience, they would have played sooner, and the paperwork would have gone through. Cool. That's as I understand it. I don't just maybe two people that care about that, but that's all I got for you. So the only thing I could tell you about the loss to Washington, and I tweeted this out there again. I was running the account for the podcast on that occasion. Is that game where they play really well? It's very competitive, and they really have a chance to win it. And Michkov has, like I said, a standout game, his best game of the year. And the only good thing about that, they lose in regulation. They keep their draft place because with 25 games remaining, I mean, I can't root against my team, but we want the bet. We need, look, Danny went and traded for Austin Farabee. As far as I'm concerned, whether they want to admit it or not, it's kind of like the white flag. He's saying, look, we're not making the playoffs. Who's fooling who here? These guys aren't part of the future. We're going to drop a couple places in the standing. It might vault us up the list for chances in the lottery. Maybe it's the right time. It's the convenient kind of soft, thinly veiled tank without actually tanking.
Yeah. And that's the way you do it. If you're going to do it, because what this does, it doesn't, you do that. And from what I understand, you can justify trading both those players. I'm pretty confident you can just by what's best for them too, because they were getting stale, and no matter what. And you looked, it was kind of like you felt bad for Joe Farabee in particular, because the guy's working his ass off every game. He's dropping gloves when he needed to. He's putting in the work, and then it's like dink off a post, and then he gets a goal, it gets disallowed. So I can feel, all right, let's just give him a change. It happens in this league. You need a change of scenery. It's very rare that players are going to play for one team their entire career. So Let's just say that right there. So, and to be able to go through this process with trading them out, you're looking at, okay, we're kind of tanking without tanking, but we're still going to keep the same philosophy in the locker room. We didn't kill the room by doing this either. So that, I think that's very important too. So it's a win-win for everybody as far as I'm concerned. They get a fresh start, and they've made a couple impacts. Frost had a very nice goal the other night. And, but let them be them now. And just, all right,
yeah,
on to the next thing.
Let go. I'm
Boom,
not going to
done.
be following them or anything like that.
No.
I could see that if it was like one of those trades and we really just, I can't understand it. What were they thinking? I'm following this guy for a little while. I want to see, I want him to do well because I was really upset. That's not the case here. These guys had plenty of time. Like DB pointed out, these are Hextall players. These aren't even Flair players. They're letting go of. Now, when they start letting go of players that were drafted by Flair, I don't care. I know it wasn't under Briere yet. I'm still going to take, a little bit of a jaundiced eye. And we'll see what happens with some of the guys.
I can get behind that a little bit. Yeah. Because, you still had the ear. You still had the ear of who was here. And if you pushed hard for that guy and it's not working out, then it's not just the old GM, it's everybody works for him too.
They know who recommended, but at the end of the day, somebody has to take responsibility, and part of that is definitely going to be Brett Flair. So we'll be monitoring that. I do want to say something before we go. I think all this thing about Rocky Thompson. You don't have to fire Rocky because he does a good job. Just as an example, Bobby Brink is a much better player, right? Because he knows how to check. Remember, Tortorella said he doesn't even know how to check.
Yeah.
Now look at him this year. Yeah, he did the work. He's stronger. He's skating better. He's better along the boards. But he had to be instructed how to do that. He had to know where to be and all that. And that's coaching.
And more importantly, it's development of a player. Right. Which we did not see with Frost and Farabee, hence the push out. It's going to be hard to develop players that are in their mid-20s now. That's
hard to change habits.
Yeah, exactly. So
like with Lennon or for Brad Shaw, we saw something very difficult for a guy in his late 20s to come in and change his game to the point where
it took 3 years.
Yeah, he's kind of worth the 5.1. It doesn't do us any good. It never should have traded for him, but still. Getting back to Rocky, you can just say, listen, don't handle the power play next year. Bring in a power play specialist as a coach. We had it before with Joey Mullen. What's the big deal? You don't have to sever the relationship if Rocky's doing good in other areas. That's all. So
I agree with that.
Yeah. So people have been talking about fire Rocky. No, just get somebody else. You got the money. They got loads of money, and they're all capped out. They could be spending so much more money if believe me, if it were at their discretion. If it were at their discretion, they probably spend another $15 million, and they get the money back with more people in the seats and having a playoff run or 2 or 3. So, but they can't. So they can make up for it on the coaching side. So listen, that's all we got for you. The Flyers are not going to play again till, like I mentioned earlier, the 22nd Saturday afternoon at the Wells Fargo Center versus the Edmonton Oilers, because there's going to be the Four Nations tournament, which starts this week.
Wednesday.
Right. And ends, I believe, on the 19th or 20th. Okay.
Thursday the 20th is the championship game.
Right. So I am not sure if we have something for you, if we're going to have a show next week. We will definitely have one on the 26th, which is a Monday. And just go to O&B Puck at O&B Puck on X and also on Blue Sky. Just put in there at O&B Puck, and it'll pop up. And also on Getter at O&B Puckcast at O&B Puckcast, and follow any show announcements that we have. If you subscribe, it'll pop up in your feed. Let me give you the opportunity to give us a last word before we say goodnight.
All right. Hey, enjoy the Four Nations. It's a fun little diversion. It gives our guys a little bit of a break too. The rest of the teams, all the players that are not playing in the Four Nations, they get a little bit of a break. Hopefully, this is a reset for the team, and they can get back to, at least, if they're not going to win, at least just get back into winning ways, winning procedures. So, hey, and also too, I'm sure we'll pop back in that meantime if there's some kind of emergency pod that we got to do, any big trades like Scott Lawton or any of the aforementioned players that we talked about. So, and if you want to argue with us on Twitter, or me particular, you can get to me on Chef to Left B on X. Chef to the Left B on X.
You got it. You can follow the great Dan Silver at dsilver88 at dsilver88. Plug that in over at Blue Sky. I think you'll catch him as well. And of course, you can follow the O&B Puckcast on several podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeart, TuneIn, and Amazon Audible. And of course, we're on YouTube and Facebook. Just plug in there O&B Puckcast. It should pop right up for you. If you could follow or subscribe, whatever applies to your platform, we really do appreciate. It helps move us up the charts when people are looking for Philadelphia Flyer podcasts. So that's it for tonight. Until next time, everybody. Thanks for listening and take care.